Right. Hello, good morning, everybody. This is 90 Minute Music. What are we going to call this podcast? Can't remember what it were going to be. We had kind of a smart name for it, but we'll probably stick that on later. Right, so I'm talking this morning to Santino Roberts, and we've had a chat before, mate, haven't we? On quite a few occasions, but we after talking, we decided we would try and do a little bit of a thing that we could share with everybody because we feel there's some value out there for people involved with music, music educators, DJs, um, music psychologists. Probably everybody involved with music needs to hear some parts of what we have to say. So I'm going to pass you over to Santino now, and he will tell you what his background is. All right, mate.
Good morning, Simon. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you this morning. Yeah, we have had some good conversations in the past. My background, jungle drum and bass DJ for the last 30 years, which has taken me up and down the country and to other countries. I've DJed with the very best in the scene, the pioneers, and artists that are very current at the same time. I used to promote events as well. And then about 15 years ago, I was asked by my local authority, which is Hull City Council, to start teaching people to DJ, which eventually led to me setting up my own business in 2018, which is DJ Methods. And the aim of that was to take DJing to everybody, regardless of age, ability, geographical circumstances, whatever.
Right, what a wonderful introduction there. Um, so yeah, not everybody knows me either. So well, I'm assuming you must have some fans from your DJing days. Only people that know me are probably people who come to my DJing nights, which I have a residency in Doncaster, where I've been doing the last 20 years. I've been a DJ for 27 years, and working with young people doing 90-minute music, which is kind of electro-acoustic music workshop. Been doing that for the last 11 years. And how we met was we both went to for some funding, and the funder asked us the question, would you like to meet? And we both said yes, and since then we've been talking on and off for the last what probably 5 years now, isn't it?
It would be
Wow.
close to that, yeah. And I didn't realize how significant it would be at the time. That was the first funding I'd ever applied for and been successful. Um, I hadn't felt the need to speak to anybody who did anything similar to myself up to that point. Um, Maybe because most of those people would have been local to me, and I think it was the fact that it was somebody from a different town or city. Um, but I also think there was something important about that funding. The funders themselves are it was very broad, wasn't it? They funded all sorts of projects, and it made me think, considering um, the relevance of some of those other projects, they seemed really huge to me. Why they would fund my project
Yeah.
as well. I had a lot of questions, and at the same time as well, I was just starting to investigate, for want of a better word, some of the other DJ tutors and schools across the country because um, I wondered whether what I was doing um, was as a good quality as I wanted it to be, ethical, and I wanted to share best practice as well with some people. So
Yeah, and I think that's you do that, don't you? Firstly, I think it's because you think to yourself, "Am I good enough?" And I think when you're already working in a creative field and you DJ to a room, you quickly find out whether you're good enough. Because either people like it or they don't. And often when other DJs come in, they will tell you whether they like it or they don't. And I think that's over the years. That's because I mean when we met, the first conversation we had, I started talking about DJing with like and how music has changed now. When I was young, it were all about big artists, And I was talking about like very big artists like Diana Ross and figurehead artists and how they fit into the music business and how the music business has changed to like I suppose people like Dizzy Rascal who've created a music in your bedroom, pirate radio and stuff like that. And I think you had something to do with that as well, didn't you? Um,
Yeah, that's very much my musical background, if you like. Being into jungle, completely DIY music, English music scene, um, born from people with nothing, just putting um, computers and technology together, trying to push what was available at the time and create a brand new sound with loads of different influences. From a DJing point of view, I think what appeals to me was it being the opposite of somebody being on stage, putting on a show. I like the kind of um, hiding in plain sight thing about DJing. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't about how you looked or any sort of image back then, although things have changed today. Um, and yeah, I grew up with in a musical family as well, where all of my family were performers. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not a performer in that traditional sense, so I kind of needed um, a performance that was less about show and more about skills for me.
but I think having that journey, it's almost like there's music for everybody, and I think we
Mm.
know that, and getting that message across is a big part about what I do. Um, but the traditional way of teaching music was almost a barrier to music for me. And it were only the belief that my music teacher had in me uh, that he suggested that I do music for a GCSE. I ignored him because I just didn't think I'd do a possibility for me to find a way to do music and actually get paid. So it's almost alien from or it were from where I were the growing up in a poor community because straight away you've got the barrier of cost for musical equipment, and then you're talking back then when jungle and drum and bass evolved, you still needed a Commodore Amiga and some music software or whatever you were running it on. Do you know what I mean? And that were expensive, wasn't it, at the time?
Well, the production side of it never really appealed to me. Probably because I understand that if I got into it, it would consume me to the extent that I wouldn't do anything else. And I'm very obsessive about music. I was just listening to what you said there about kind of starting points, and I think probably depending on the community or culture that you grow up in, music was very much something that happened at home for me, never at school. Um, so I was surrounded by instruments at home that um, I don't know the names of them all. A lot of Latin American percussion instruments, something like that. And I just took it for granted that that's what everybody had. Do you know what I mean? And then I'd go to school and music was, I'd hesitate to call it music. They'd give you a recorder or a triangle, something completely irrelevant to my life. It certainly wasn't inspiring or anything that would make you think, I'm going to follow a path educationally with music. There was no um, access to anything that I would have considered um, part of my life. The idea of um, coming across DJ equipment at school it never occurred that that could have been a possibility. Do you know what I mean? And our well, we didn't have music teachers. We had teachers of other subjects covering for that lesson. So music lessons were a joke. I mean, they were just the most disrupted,
Mm.
free for all. You know, most of those lessons would just be spent stuff being slung around the room and people getting messed about. I mean, for want of a
Yeah.
better word, you know, pointless,
They
absolutely
get
pointless.
marginalized, don't they? The
Well,
music
just
lessons.
music. I mean, this is we're going back to the 90s here and late 80s. and it was already then. You know, this is a conversation I have with young people today. Now, if you ask most young people what art is, they just think it's drawing because that's what art was at school. Music
Mm.
was never considered to be an art. It was just a DOS. You know what I mean? And I think the timing of this conversation is really important because of what's happening with um, the national plan for music and this idea that the music mark and music education is going to make changes where music is once again going to be given some sort of priority in schools and education generally. But then I ask the question whether what we do is going to be included in that offer. Do you know what I mean? And um, young people today, if they want to grow up to be a DJ or an electronic music producer, like, is that something they can access early in school enough to um, allow them to follow that as a path? Do you know what I mean? And would they understand um, how that qualification would play a part in a future, career path choice, or choosing to go to a particular college, university, etc. I don't know. I think it's going to take a long time to repair the damage that had clearly already started when I was young. I don't know whether the generation before us would have had a similar experience. Like when did it all start to go wrong?
I think it started to go wrong a long time ago. I would imagine. I don't think it was. I think the idea of education itself has been going wrong for at least 100 years.
Okay,
But we've
it's a
just stuck
deeper
with it.
conversation. Yeah,
We've
yeah,
just stuck with it and kept churning out people who were um, traumatized, tr people who've not connected with school. They just come out into the world, become homeless, become uh, victims, become criminals. Not all of us, but if I think about it, when I were the street where I lived, within 50 yards of my house, there were there's there were one, two, there were three kids and me. The girl, I don't, I don't want to. I do. I'm trying to protect their identities. Do you know what I mean? But let's put it this way: they all went to jail. Oh no, sorry, there were another two kids. They didn't go to jail. But so out of five of them, three went to jail, and two became heroin addicts. And that's just in a small. I lived in a nice street, in
yeah,
a relatively poor area.
yeah.
But going back onto the music thing, the fact that your family had musicians or or instruments in the house would have given you an advantage already over many people without you even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's definitely how I see it today. But it took a really long time in my life for that to be the case,
Mm.
because of the damage that the education system caused me. So I don't know what it is, whether this is the education system or whether it's British culture or whatever. But there's something about you're this or you're that. You're never both.
Mm.
So in your earliest days at nursery or primary school, you're told, oh, you're creative, you're academic, you're this, you're that. And when you're 4 years old or 5 years old, and if you've already developed a trust for adults, based on don't put your hand in that fire, you'll burn yourself.
Yeah,
Oh, that's everything you tell me must be true.
yeah,
So if an adult who's a teacher who, is supposed to be this trusted, uh, educated, I don't know, expert, you don't know when you're 40.
no,
um, if they tell you you're academic, and then your first experience of or your only experience of something creative at school is art, where you're expected to draw, cut things out, stick, all things that didn't appeal to me when I was young. I'm not very good at drawing. It's an understatement. To the extent that I've had teachers threaten me with detentions for not taking it seriously, even though it was my best effort and I genuinely wasn't um, making fun of the situation. Do you know what I mean? So I've got no access to anything that's musically relatable to what I'd experienced at home. Um, I got into trouble in cookery lessons. Everything that I tried at school that was creative didn't work. So I believed this idea that I must be this academic individual.
Mm,
Took me until I was 40 years old to believe in the idea that I was a creative person. Um, and this was a youth work manager who I worked for. And even then, I was arguing with her about my creative capabilities. And
mm.
it just makes me think how many people, if that can happen to me coming from my family, what happens to people who've not been surrounded by that? So, yeah, it is an advantage to me.
Yeah.
But um, only once you accept, I think, that you're um, I don't know, that sort of person or have those capabilities.
Do you know what? I had a similar conversation. I came in from a bike ride yesterday, and my wife's talking to my son, and I'm thinking, oh, what have I walked into here? And he's saying, oh, I can't do anything. I'm rubbish at school, this, that, and other. And he says they're sucking at my creativity. That's what he said. And I don't know if it's because he's around, me and talking about my work and stuff. And one of the things I'm influenced by is Ken Robinson, and he talks about how creativity is being killed by schools basically and the education system. I mean, we all know it, but we just it's like it's people like me that and you that are kind of bastions that stand up, not necessarily against it, because I think deep down we'd want to work with education in some kind of way, but
What has struck me is that I liked school when I was a young child. Do you know, primary school, even parts of junior school, but secondary school is where it really started to go wrong for me. And and then later on in life, I've worked in schools. Um, uh, so you know, it's not as if I've spent most of my life or all of my life um, being against the education system. It's having been a part of it and really trying to make something of it, still feeling let down and being it almost like chiseled away from me any enjoyment of it and any um, being able to survive, being able to exist within it. You know, I
yeah.
felt the longer I worked in schools, the less I became me, the less I was my own person, and it um yeah, I felt like it was crushing me. This and if you look at the whole way that creative subjects were treated and like treated as less, the thing that really opened my eyes was when they were having drama, music, art, all of these lessons. Whatever was being taught in English influenced what was being taught in those lessons. So if you were doing Shakespeare in English, you would have to do something Shakespeare related in your drama lesson or in your art. And it was
Mm,
like, that's really interesting. So because English is the core subject, what if it was the other way around? What if what we were studying in music influenced what you learned in English? And
mm.
it's a totally different concept. And it that I guess that was the start really of me thinking I need to leave this system. It goes against everything that I am, you know.
I think, yeah, if you were to ask any teacher, they would all agree with us. They'd all agree with us in private, but in public, I don't think they would because
I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so
what
sure about that because
do you mean?
I've met teachers who get angry with young people who display unwanted behavior and they'll challenge it by saying, "How can you behave like this when it's for free?" And actually, I don't think what they understand is that a lot of young people look at school as prison, a place
Yeah,
where I have to go or else, rather
yeah.
than when they come to us, it's choice.
Mm. It's a different. They're coming to us for a benefit, and I think what one of the things. I mean, probably we're almost running out of time now because we've only got like half an hour. Um,
I'm
but
happy to do two parts.
right, okay, we'll do that then. I don't do it. I probably have to send you another link, won't I?
Rubbish.
Right. But yeah. So to conclude, this is part one. It's very weird. It's weird doing this because obviously we've had conversations before where we can just relax, talk, and we often talk about this stuff
We
anyway.
do, but I think maybe sometimes we're too relaxed when we talk about it, and we don't always get to the absolute core of it. I think focusing on it is really healthy, actually.
Mm,
Almost going back to when we first got to know each other, when we didn't let our guard down or whatever because we didn't know each other. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, yeah, maybe sometimes we spoke about things that were just about our own personal lives rather than our professional lives. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, this is part one. And do you know what? It's going to get better and it's going to get more honed. And I think over the course of the next few months, we'll have something to offer to lots of people out there. I think there's people doing what we do who who can benefit. And even if it's just a thing where it's somebody who does what we do in a different area of the country or a different area of the world, and they go, do you know what? That's what I experienced. Because it's interesting for me to know that, because meeting you and having a conversation with you is a lot of the things, a lot of your experiences, even though we come from different DJing worlds, we come from different like education and things like that. There's so many similarities in what we do and maybe frustrations which we share as well.
I think it's the validations, isn't it? Is when you are
Yeah.
self-employed and you work on your own and you do a job that's actually quite unique.
Mm,
Uh, it's difficult to meet people that you can share similar experiences with.
yeah. Right. That's been part one, episode one, whatever you want to call it, and we'll follow up with a second half as soon as I can find the link. Thank if anybody's watching out there. Thanks for watching and getting to the end. Right. I'll see you in a minute.